and reliable service delivery remains one of the biggest challenges in South Africa. Municipalities across the country are in crisis with broken infrastructure. How does poor service delivery impact the country? Well, today the Centre for Risk Analysis launched their 2022 edition of the Socio-Economic Survey of South Africa. David Ansara is the Chief Operating Officer of the Centre for Risk Analysis, and he joins us now to discuss this further with us. Thank you very much, David, for your time here on All Angles. What has been the findings in your survey?
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us on. So, indeed, we did launch the Socio-Economic Survey of South Africa today. It is a flagship reference guide of the Centre for Risk Analysis. You can see that it is quite a tome, over 800 pages. So there's quite a lot of data in there which details some of the fundamental underlying trends in South Africa. And we had a presentation this morning to our clients and members of the media where we went through some of these data trends. And, what we're seeing is a breakdown in the capacity of the state to deliver basic services. Much of this is because of South Africa's low growth trap that it is currently stuck in, which is impacting on government revenues. So we now see government finances are running quite large deficits. Not quite as high as during COVID, but that is still quite high, 5.7% deficit. And this is meaning that government across all spheres of governance is experiencing a kind of breakdown in basic services. And this is very acutely felt at the local level. And, we also detailed how this is impacting on consumers, etc., and on standards of living. So across key measures, access to housing, access to water and sanitation, electrification, these trends are all showing negative. But that hasn't always been the case. During the mid-2000s, we saw dramatic rises in living conditions, people getting access to formal housing. And that was the dividends of South Africa's high growth at that time. So, I think the story that emerged from our discussion this morning was that the success or failure of South Africa is really contingent on the policies that are implemented. And at the moment in South Africa, the policy framework is very constraining. We're not getting on top of those core governance risks that are leading us to seeing some of the very evident breakdown in our infrastructure, the rolling blackouts across the country, as well as some of the water problems that were profiled in your headlines there. So, I think the picture at the moment is of a very strained system, and the government's just really not able to, to capacitate that system to be effective in terms of service delivery.
And obviously, besides the fact that we see our government being cash-strapped, it's also self-inflicted, right? Some of the issues that we see in terms of being cash-strapped, etc. There's also just that issue of a non-willingness to actually sort things out and get things together.
Yes, indeed. And a lot of this is because, in many ways, of the ideological orientation of the government. So there's an inherent suspicion towards the private sector and the profit motive. The government has a tendency to try and centralize all activities. And you saw that with that news item with the SAMWU spokesperson saying, oh, well, we need to now centralize local governance. That will just concentrate those risks even further. The government already has this equitable share that it distributes to the provinces. But there's a problem there of a breakdown in the accountability mechanisms. So when you centralize all governance in Pretoria, that means that ordinary citizens on the ground spread out around the country become divorced from their elected representatives, means that policy failures aren't corrected, aren't checked. So what we would recommend at the Centre for Risk Analysis is more of a much more devolved system of governance where you empower local communities, you enable them to hold their local representatives accountable. And we are starting to see that, particularly with the outcome of the recent local government elections. Voters responded by punishing the ANC at the polls, albeit there was quite a low voter turnout during those elections. We still see that electoral process is still very critical. But, democracy is more than just elections every few years. it's also about those accountability mechanisms as well.
Absolutely, I agree. And if this continues in this trajectory, David, what risk do we face as South Africa?
Well, I think the risks are already upon us. You have effluent running into the Vaal River, systems breaking down. We're kind of getting used to load shedding in our society, but that's not a good thing.
We expect it.
Consistent, reliable energy supply is the core foundation of an industrial economy. And, it's quite inconvenient when the lights go out at home and you're in the middle of your laundry. But that's kind of a manageable risk. What isn't a manageable risk is when you're running a steel foundry and the giant boiler that you're running can't be consistently operating. So that you really need that core base of a reliable, consistent energy available on demand. Until we have that, we're going to have a hard ceiling on our growth. The last 10 years, we haven't really been able to go above 2% GDP growth. So until we have that security of energy supply guaranteed, we're not going to grow. But to your question, how does this play out? And yes, there are significant risks, but I think there are also some upsides as well. And what we're seeing now is people realizing, particularly at the local government level in more rural municipalities, that people are taking it upon themselves to fill that gap that has been left by the state. If you consider some of the governance problems in Harrismith, for example, you have the Harrismith heroes, communities from different kind of racial backgrounds, different socioeconomic class backgrounds, coming together to fix the sewage works, to improve energy distribution. There are business groups, civil society groups that are starting to coordinate citizens and start to provide some of those services. And, I think perhaps South Africans are realizing that, you can either wait for government to self-correct and the lights stay on and the water system continues to be unreliable, or you can get involved in governance yourself. And that's by no means easy, that process. But, the alternative is that we continue to see a deterioration in our basic services and standards of living.
Well, thank you very much for your time here on All Angles. We really appreciate that discussion. That was David Ansara. He's Chief Operating Officer of the Centre for Risk Analysis.